Welcome to the season finale of the Aim and Five Hole podcast. Phil and my man Ryan, how you doing?
So I'm doing really well.
We've had a
Really,
couple
really
weeks
well.
off. We've had a
Had a
couple
couple
weeks
weeks
off.
off. Got
Lots
to
have
watch the
happened.
didn't watch really much of the draft at all because the Canadians traded away their two top draft picks. And But I followed the free agency
And it was a
with
terrible television draft. That was awful. Let's hope they never do that
oh,
again.
we'll talk about that. We will absolutely, as a couple of television guys, we will
Oh, that was so
very
bad.
much talk about that. That was possibly the worst
Leave it to
production of
ESPN to
anything.
make it really
Even
shit.
worse.
That's sorry, my language. Sorry, go ahead.
Even worse. Um, So it's been a really interesting 2 weeks. We've got a million things to talk about before we sign off and get ready for next season by taking some well deserved rest and moving on from there. But as is our tradition, we should start by talking about what has happened to our beloved Habs and Leafs
You want to go there first? You
during
want
the
to get me on
period.
my temper tantrum really early, do you?
I'm going to get you on your temper tantrum because the Leafs did what everybody expected they would do in not signing Mitch Marner, and then did, I believe the word is shit sandwich ever since in terms of improving their team with
Well,
their cap space. So let's
yeah.
talk about the Leafs.
Yes, well, let's go right to the heart of the thing. Look at we can go back to the first episode last year in September when we started this thing. You can verify for the listeners. I had the for sale sign on Mitch Marner right from the beginning of the season. And what happened? He had to go. There's no question. He's a tremendous hockey player, great regular season player, but he in 9 seasons has done absolutely nothing in the playoffs. The team, after 9 years of failures in the playoffs, could not deliver the same team back to last season. Unfortunately, his contract was up and he had to go. The way it all happened is unfortunate, and I would at least give Trey Leaving some credit for at least getting something in return. We can talk about the tampering issues, which is probably the only reason they got somebody back for him. But if you listen to all the prognosticators out there and the experts, this was he Marner wanted to be gone last year, and wanted to play out his contract, wanted to go find the money he wanted, and wanted to go play somewhere else, which makes me more mad that he refused, absolutely refused at the trade deadline to waive his no trade clause. The team
Yep.
tried to move him, tried to get something in. And so most Leaf fans like me will wonder forever what could have been if we had Mikko Rantanen on their lineup for last playoffs. Does that mean we would have won the Stanley Cup? Maybe not, but we'll never know. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when Mitch Marner comes back into the building once a year and he's going to get booed. He's definitely going to get booed. Now, they're going to play a video tribute for him, which I wish they wouldn't, but they're going to. Um, but he is definitely going to get booed. There's no question. He has now become, from a prolific career and should have had his eventually jersey in the rafters, he's now gone out as a villain. And that's
So
unfortunate.
here's an interesting question, and you can think beyond hockey here.
And I'm drinking my
And I
Labatt
invite
Blue while we're doing this.
All right, I invite. I'm on my second glass of G4 Reposado tequila to all of our listeners. If you are tequila fans,
There you go.
it's a
Looking for
delicious
sponsors.
one.
We're looking for
We're
sponsors.
looking for sponsors. G4 Reposado, one of my favorites. Anyway, I have a question, and don't take much time thinking about this, and I will pose it out there for our listeners to think about in their own time. Has there ever been in any sport a hometown pro athlete that left their hometown team? They were fortunate enough to get drafted, developed, and turned into a star by their hometown team, who then left under this type of circumstances to the point where they get booed when they come home. I cannot
I
think of
can't
one
think
off
of
the
one,
top of
and
my
I
head.
don't think it's happened in this era of hockey. Maybe in the original six era it might have happened, but it's definitely not happened in this era. This is really an unfortunate story, and it was handled very poorly, I believe, by the Mitch Marner camp. And Mitch Marner, I said this to you after it happened. He's gone out. He's looking for the money payout. You can say all you want. You don't want to play in Toronto because of the limelight and the pressure and all that. That is absolutely BS. We've talked about this. You should welcome the pressure. It means the team is in the limelight. It means you're a star. It means you're a celebrity. It means you're getting paid. Like it's just
By the way,
BS.
by the
I'm
way, I
sorry.
disagree with that. I don't think it's
I don't.
BS. I think anybody has the right to feel the way they do. But
Yeah.
if that's the case, he should have forced his way out before his last contract.
Yeah, they and apparently, if you listen to some of the experts, um, Dumbass tried to say to trade him as he refused to waive his no trade clause a couple of years ago. So it's been twice that he's done this. So
Yeah.
the team clearly believed that he was going to be the hardest one to resign. He's held out for money once. He held out this time. So I think he's going to be a bit of a villain when he comes back. And the only saving grace for him is he's only going to come back maybe once a year. Maybe if they come into Toronto, because being in the West and being in Vegas, they only play once, twice a season, depending on
Yeah.
the
I'm
schedule
hoping
makers.
it's
So,
once a year because I don't love it when Vegas does well in the
right,
playoffs.
yeah,
I just
yeah.
don't like.
Well, here's the problem now. Vegas made themselves a lot better in the regular season, and doesn't help
Yeah,
them in
well,
the playoffs at this point.
We'll come back to
But
Vegas's off season in a bit, but
yeah,
because
so
we're focused on our hometown
yeah,
teams right
so let's
now.
let's
But all
let's
right, so
finish on Toronto then.
where does that leave Toronto where
Well,
they are now?
two other pieces got done that needed to be done. And that was getting Matthew Nyes, who is a up and coming superstar power forward, signing to a 6 year deal, 7.75 million, probably a little on the high side for the first couple of years, but
Yeah,
this
yeah.
deal is going to look really good by year 3 or 4. If he keeps progressing at the current rate that he is, he's going to be a prototypical power forward that
He
is
could
going
be
to
a
be
Mark
effective.
Stone.
Yeah, he could
If
be a
he could
next Cam
turn
Neely. He could be the next
if
Cam Neely.
if he could turn into a slightly better defensive player, he could be a Mark Stone.
Yeah, he's going to be. Yeah, I think this contract's going to age really well. Tavares signing and giving a bit of a hometown savings, which was great, and will which is great. So you couldn't once Marner was gone. The free agents pool thinned really quickly with Marchant deciding to stay where he was. Ehlers deciding he wasn't going to come. Brock Bozer,
Besser.
Besser re-signing with Vancouver. The free agent pool got really thin really quickly. So the Leafs had to sign what they did in terms of Tavares and Nyes. Now getting Waugh in return, who is a great third, fourth line centerman. Yeah,
He's a
absolutely.
four
But
C.
again, with the lineup where it is right now, yes, you can argue 3 or 4, whatever. He's going to be a great bottom six power forward, big guy. He's going to
If he's
bang.
your 3C, you're not winning a Stanley Cup.
No, no.
So you got to. He's a
There's no
very good four
question.
C.
There's no question that the Leafs, Trey Leaving's got some work to do this summer, and he's got to bring another piece, and he's going to have to get rid of somebody to go. And you look at, I've had the for sale sign on Morgan Riley. He's the one that's got to go. It's 7, 6, 7 million. I can't remember what he's at, but that piece goes. You can bring in somebody else of significance to a centerman to begin with. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of them out there. We talked about this before we came on air. Maybe Kadri, they can get him out of Calgary. Calgary's not in a real hurry, maybe to get rid of him. They're holding a lot of cards right now because a lot of teams want Kadri because of his ability to be that Marchant type, walk the line forward and gritty centerman. And seems now he's won a Stanley Cup. He's matured a bit. You really want to see him back in Toronto, but he is what the doctor ordered right now in terms of what's left and what's out there could be gotten, right? So,
Yeah.
but Calgary's also holding cards on Vegas because they want um, at Anderson on the point, right? So, with Peter Angelo not coming back next season because of injury, they're thin on the back end. So, Calgary's holding a lot of cards on what they could or couldn't do. But the Leafs have got some work to do, and there's no question. There's no way that the lineup they've got right now is the lineup is going to take the ice in October. There's just no way. And if it is, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And you got to hope that Easton Cowan can step up into a bottom six contributing forward heading into next season. He's not going
He
to be a
has
top
to
six.
be.
Got to
He
be a
has to
third or
be.
fourth line winger, a third line winger.
He has to be at worst a third line scoring winger
Mhm.
at
No
worst
question.
for them to really compete hard again.
The Leafs have got work to do. There's no question about it. They didn't get Marchant as they hoped they were going to try and get a shot at. They thought they might get a shot at Ekblad if they didn't get one of them. Florida pulled
Yep.
off the miracle of all miracles, which we'll get to in bringing everybody back. Power to them, Bill Zito and what he's done there. But the Leafs have got work to do. There's no question. This team is no longer a Stanley Cup contender. They'll make the playoffs, but if they want to go deep, they got work to do, and they got to
Yep.
shore up the middle and got to bring another top six forward. So, but hey, let's get on past my Leafs and go to your Habs, who pulled off a little bit of
Wow.
a minor
So
transaction there into the draft.
yeah, they clearly. I mean,
You
not
got to be
saying anything
happy.
I'm not saying anything that 1,000 pundits haven't already said, but they've clearly moved into a new phase of their team construction, right? It's just no longer a rebuild. It's now you're constructing things for pieces and how those pieces fit in the short term, in the long term. Um,
Well, now that you made the playoffs unexpectedly this past season, you can't go backwards. You've got to make the
I
playoffs
mean,
next
but
year.
they got even younger.
Yes.
That's the crazy thing is somehow they managed to get even younger as a roster because Dobson's only 26 or 25. Bolduc's 24 or 23. I don't know, one of the two. But they've gotten even younger. Savard is gone. Dvorak is gone, although he wasn't yet 30.
Heineman is
Our,
gone.
Heineman is gone. He was very young. But Bolduc is like Heineman, but better,
Right.
and has played in the playoffs himself and has more playoff experience than Heineman. So I think the Canadians have positioned themselves brilliantly for the short term and the long term because I think in getting Noah Dobson, who I can't remember if I've sang his praises on this podcast before, maybe at the beginning of the season. I've always thought he was a great player.
He's
Um,
been a bit underachieving though the last few years. Now he's on a terrible
he
team.
he he underachieved
He's
this year.
underachiever.
He underachieved this year. He was deployed, in my opinion, just looking at some of the stats and the deployments and stuff like that, horribly by Patrick Roy. And it that's in my mind seems to serve to bolster my contention that was a terrible head coach and has no business coaching in the NHL. But that's for the New York Islanders
Well,
just
it's going
determined,
to be
not for
interesting to
me to
see how long
determine.
he lasts there now that Lou Lamoriello's gone. They've got new management. They've kept him. They need to have a little bit of stability there because of the turnover, or the front
Yeah,
office turnover on the ice. Need a little bit of stability, but if they don't come out of the gates well, he's gone quickly. He's gone before
yeah.
Christmas if they don't come out strong.
Based on what they look like now, yeah, I know they have Heineman. They've got they signed Jonathan Drouin, made another couple moves. To me, they look like a mushy middle team spinning its wheels. And that's all they're doing. They're just
Yeah,
spinning their wheels and they'll be in exactly the same place.
yeah. They're not going to make the
Um,
playoffs.
they're
But go
not
back
they're not
to
going to be class. But the
let's go back to your
Canadians,
Montreal
so the
Canadiens.
Canadians have, David Savard retires. They pick up Noah Dobson. Now they've got a top four: Mike Matheson, Noah Dobson, Caden Gooley, and Lane Hudson. That's a strong top four. You've got offense and defense oriented defensemen on both pairings. And then you've got third pairing. You've got Jacka. You've got Struble. You got possibly Reinbacher coming out of the AHL, who's their number fifth pick in the draft from a couple of years ago. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of growth, and Alex Carrier. I don't want to forget about Alex Carrier since he was their big trade pickup last year.
Mhm.
Like their third pairing will be much stronger than their third pairing last year.
So is
Then
it
they go ahead and trade one of those extraneous defensive prospects, Logan Mayu, um, who was looking good, great, in fact, as a skating offensive defenseman, but makes just a whole bunch of terrible reads defensively. He's got a long way to go. He'll probably be good. I think he'll be pretty good. Um, but he's a part that they didn't need, and they traded him for Zach Bolduc, who is a Trois-Rivières kid. He's a Quebec kid. He's going to make the fans real happy. He scored, he's a 25 goal guy on a playing second line minutes for
right?
sure if he keeps his trajectory. And they like the physicality and they like the two-way game that he's developed
Right.
in the last year in Minnesota. So that's exactly the kind of guy that Martin St. Louis and Hugo Gordon and Hughes are looking for. So and he's 23.
Right. So is the
So
biggest piece you lost Joel Armida then? Armina?
well, Armia left. So okay. So where does that leave the Canadians? Right. So they've gotten younger. They've gotten some more scoring up front. They've got some more offensive and defensive power in the back line. What's left? Well, they've lost their defensive face-off specialist in Christian Dvorak. and they've lost their second best penalty killer after Jake Evans in Yoel Armia. So where do you go from there? Do you find a second penalty killer from who they're bringing up, whether it's Oliver Kapanen, whether it's Owen Beck? Maybe one or both of those guys makes the team this year. Do you find somebody who's already on the squad who can pick that up? I think there's a very good chance that perhaps Alex Newhook, with his speed, could become a decent PK guy as well. Not the greatest face-off guy in the world for that purpose, but he has potential. In addition to his offense, he can maybe bring some defensive speed into that high pressure penalty kill that they like. And then they still have a massive question mark at the 2C position, like everybody else.
Right.
And they've got Kirby Dach, who's coming off, another knee surgery. There is a lot of talk that he may, come back stronger than ever. He's lost weight. He's looking like he's put some,
Muscle
he's
on it.
looking, he's looking to put some muscle on and some, what's the word I want to look for? Cardiovascular, improvements into his game already. So I think I think that they have not lost hope on
Right.
Kirby Dach yet, but he has to prove it, and this is
Right.
this is his one season to do it.
Right.
Could given the question you raised before about Calgary and Kadri, what if they were to package Kirby Dach and next year's firsts, or they have 2 seconds next year, 2 second-round draft picks, plus Dach for Nazem Kadri.
Yeah.
Now you've got your
Possible.
2C for at least 2 or 3 years until Michael Hage
Yeah.
becomes out of Michigan and turns into a real 2C center. Hopefully he does that. So they have options. They definitely have options, but I think they're going to ride with Dach and see what he can
Right.
become, and then trade him at the deadline if it's not working out.
There has been some chatter out there that one of their prominent defensemen could get traded in order to shore up some of their offensive woes.
Yeah, so they also there's been some buzz that maybe now that they've got Reinbacher still waiting to come up, maybe you let Mike Matheson go at the
Matheson,
top
yeah,
at
that's being the
his
one.
highest value. Yeah, at,
Right.
at his highest value. Um, Maybe that happens. Like I'm a little skeptical just because I don't know. I'm not an expert, but everybody who's like close to the way the chatter is going seems to
Mm.
think it's going to be a quiet July and August.
Yeah, see,
But
I disagree with that. I think that it's going to be obviously once July 1st happens, from the 1st to the 3rd/4th, things are hot and heavy. GMs are trying to get the free agency
yep,
stalwarts signed and make those initial moves. And then the July 4th happens, everything goes quiet. And then
yep.
teams sort of sit in the background saying, okay, what do we need? What assets do we have? What money do we have left over? Where's the cap going to be? What room do we have? Players and whatnot. And I actually think it's going to be a really big and busy end of July, beginning of August as teams start. Once that first trade happens, I think it's just going to start a waterfall because there's so many teams looking for the same player. I don't mean the same person, the same style of player,
It's type of player. Yeah,
type of player, and the free agency pool got really thin really quickly with what um, um, the Panthers were able to do, and quite frankly, what Vancouver was able to do in terms of bringing back some of their players as well. So,
yeah.
so everybody's looking for the same style of player, and it's going to take one big trade to sort of let the stuff go. And teams need to decide, like Calgary's one of them, where they're going next year. Are they going to be a
Yeah.
contender to make the playoffs, or are they going to try and stick to a plan, or are they going to like maybe sell off some assets to get something in return and rebuild, right? So,
That's why
um,
I think I personally think it will probably stay quiet, and I think a lot of the trades you're talking about, those dominoes will fall probably in November, maybe early
it's
December.
possible. It's possible. I think there'll be a few
Thanksgiving rule,
before.
baby. You got to come. It always
Yeah,
comes back to the
absolutely. Thanks. It
Thanksgiving
does
rule.
come back to the Thanksgiving rule, but I think there's going to be
If
a
you're out at
few.
Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
start dealing stuff.
I think there's going to be a few things that happen before the season because let's be honest, and we'll get to Miami to the Panthers in a second. Both Toronto and Edmonton and Winnipeg for that reason, if they want to continue to be contenders for the Stanley Cup, need to do something because they all lost pieces and are not going to be considered Stanley Cup favorites if they don't do something. The Leafs lost their top scorer. Okay, maybe didn't do anything in the playoffs, so we need another depth forward. Winnipeg lost arguably a little bit of a heart and soul guy in Ehlers that brought some scoring, a 30 some odd goal scorer, was gritty, some speed, quiet sort of leader, and they were thin down the middle to begin with. So they lose Ehlers on the top six. Now they're down two guys. So, and no disrespect to Jonathan Tags, who's an awesome guy, an awesome player, but he's going to be your fourth line center to start the season until he improves what he does. So they're still a little thin
Yeah,
up
and you
front.
have to ask yourself if Scheifele can
Right,
reproduce the season he just had,
right,
or
right.
whether it was sort of an outlier.
Yeah,
Um,
and then Edmonton, they got problems on the back end. They got problems now on the front end. They lost a bunch of guys, and they still got a problem in net.
yeah,
And
well,
they
we'll
got
come to that. We'll
zero
come to that.
cap, and they got zero cap room.
Yeah, so we'll come to that. So
So it's got to happen in
let's
trades.
talk about let's talk about which teams got better
Oh,
in free agency, which teams got worse. So let's start
okay.
with better. I got to start on the top of my list with Carolina.
Really? Let's say let's before we get the by just resigning their own players,
All right, Florida.
The
I don't think
Panthers
they got
are
better. They
better.
just stayed amazing
It stayed amazing. And how Zito did this now, he has sacrificed a bit of the future to the
a
win
bit.
now. A bit of the future to win now because Marchand's contract, as Nyes's contract is going to age really well at 5.5 million. Marchand looks really good for the next year or two, but it looks terrible the last 4 years of that deal. And they're going
Well, first of all, Marchand's like it'd be worse if it was like an $8 or $9 million number.
right.
Like,
But still, five and a half when
but
he's
still,
not going to be playing 6 years, let alone three. The
yeah.
last
I
three,
mean,
four
that's
years of
going to
this deal is
be
going to be terrible.
yeah. That's kind of like the Bobby Bonilla of the Florida Panthers. They're going to be
Yeah.
paying him forever for not playing. I think, but
But Ekblad left a lot of money on the table. He could
yeah,
have gotten $8, $9 million as a defenseman, maybe more. So you got to give it credit to those players.
and Bennett
And Bennett, and he left a little bit of money on the table. You got to give credit for those players. And this is what I would say to the Toronto Maple Leafs, Oilers, Winnipeg. Yes, I know there's a difference in the taxes and all that BS and stuff. I'm here to tell you it's not as bad as you think it is. But but they all have got a taste for winning. They want to keep winning, and they've all taken hometown discounts to stay there. And other teams like Marner are chasing money and chasing fame and fortune. And maybe never win,
look.
right? So
I don't think you can
let
completely.
that be a mantra to players of the future. Winning is better than maybe better than the money at some point.
Yes.
Here's my
Uh,
soapbox.
I don't want to undersell the tax thing. I know you're calling it BS. I don't want, look, you're live in Florida. You know what it costs to live in Florida. And by the way, it certainly requires a little bit of self-awareness on both of our parts to talk about, people who grew
Yes,
up in the northern part of the US or the southern part of Canada, deciding to take less money to live in a sunny place.
having the
That's
sun
what
every
we
day is what is very nice.
yeah, I mean, you live in Florida, I live in LA. I mean, it makes it would be tough for us to say that people shouldn't do that.
Right.
But beyond that, I think you make a really good point in the sense that when you build a winning culture, and not just a winning culture, but a culture of togetherness and unity and friendship, where everybody feels like they're rowing in the same direction and it's the same cadence. People want to stay, and they're going to take less money to
Right.
stay because I think a lot of players talk to each other
Yeah,
and they talk
absolutely.
about and
How great it is. How
they
great the
talk about
room
how
is.
great it is, and they talk about how how less stressful it is to work in that kind of environment, quite
Cool.
frankly,
And winning solves
and
a
winning
lot of
solves a lot
issues.
of things.
But here's the thing. Obviously, Florida Panthers go into next season as the Stanley Cup favorite and a chance to do a three-peat, which no one has done since I guess the Oilers were the last.
Yeah,
The Oilers were the last team to three-peat, right? So I think they're the favorites to go in. But let's put it this: if they don't three-peat, that becomes a really ugly environment because then everybody's going, "I gave up money to be here and we didn't win." And then and could be gone the year after because he's up for renewal. So it's going to be interesting to see what
Yeah,
happens
he'll be 37
if
too.
they don't win next year. It's going to be really interesting what happens to that team going into the future because some of those contracts don't age really well in when the players get older and they're yes they took discounts now so it looks really good now could look really bad going forward and the discord could turn what's making them winners right now could turn on them in 2 years if they're not winning.
Yeah. No, they're going to be good for a few years. I mean, they've got Ekblad, Jones,
Oh, no
Marchand,
question.
Bennett,
No
Reinhart,
question.
Barkov. All those guys are signed for a while.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
there's no, there's
yes,
they're going to be a very good team for a good long time,
yes.
and they're not old other than Marchand
No, no,
and maybe
they're
Bobrovsky.
yeah.
So screw Florida. I hate them, but damn it, they're
I
good,
still
and
hate
they
them. Yes,
and
I
they
hate
did
them.
they took care of business so far this summer, and I hate them for it.
Yes. So, but I
Um,
think you're right. The other then, if we want to go to the other teams that have improved themselves at the
let's start with
deadline,
Carolina.
Carolina
Getting
is at close to the top
Yeah,
of the list.
yeah. I mean, they signed Stankoven long term. They pick up Nikolai Ehlers, and they replace Brent Burns, who I love Brent Burns. Don't get me
So do
wrong. I love
I.
his the toothless one will be one of my favorites forever, but he's 40 or
Yeah.
whatever. Getting Keandre Miller and signing him long term, I think, is going to do a lot for them.
And if he refines his game and becomes the player and defenseman everybody thought he could be,
Yeah,
that
they're
that's
gonna.
a there'll be a good team next year.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd still say they got
but
a bit of a problem at the back in the net.
they've got a bit of a problem in the net. They haven't solved that, especially health wise, man. Those
Right.
guys just can't stay healthy. But they've got a bit of a problem in the net, and they still have a problem up the middle.
Yeah.
They've got Aho as the number 1C, and if you look at their depth chart right now, their 2C is Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who is a 3C at best. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a decent player. He's a lovely guy, from what I've heard,
But this
but
goes
he is not going
back,
to win you a Stanley Cup in the
yes,
2C slot.
but this is what we've gone back to. How many teams now we identify as looking for a 2C?
Everybody is. Everybody
It's
is.
incredible, right? That so that is the most pressing need on a lot of hockey teams right now is a 2C. But I agree with you. Carolina looks a lot better. And if anybody right now on paper is going to give Florida Panthers a run for their money, it's going to be the Carolina Hurricanes in
Yeah.
the East. In the East.
Yeah. And
The
I
other
think
team,
Vegas got
yeah.
stronger, right? But
Vegas got stronger in the regular season.
yeah, and they lost, and unfortunately they didn't lose a player so much as the players' injuries took their
Nice.
toll, as Alex Petrangelo may not
Well,
play again.
that's a double hit. Peter
Yeah.
Angelo gone from the Vegas, and unfortunately, then you've got a stalwart on the point that won't be with Team Canada in
Yeah.
the Olympics, and
Yeah.
that's a
Because
we'll
it's an
talk
Olympic year.
Olympics. We'll talk
Yeah,
Olympics
Olympics is down the road.
next year,
Olympics is down the
but
road.
that's a
But
double
yeah,
hit for Team Canada and for Vegas, and that's a big personality with a lot of veteran know-how, a great defenseman that can play both sides of the puck. That's a big loss for the Vegas Knights. They've got to now fix that, which we talked about again. Calgary is holding a card on them, but you
yep,
just looked it up. Without Peter Angelo in the lineup, they're still only got $1 million of cap room with people to sign, and they got a secondary problem. They still don't have good goaltend. I don't care what you say about Edding Hill. He's won a Stanley Cup. I still don't think he's very good.
yeah,
So they still got a
yeah,
problem in the pipes, right? So you got to fill the defensive core. Yes, you're stronger in the regular season with Marner there, no question, but he's yet to prove it in the playoffs.
yeah,
And they're not a grittier team. They're a less gritty team without Peter Angelo, and less gritty because they lost Waugh, which was one of their gritty guys to Toronto. So yes, there's no question you've had a lot of scoring and a lot of potential on the front end, but you've hurt your back end is needs some help.
Well, and yes, the back end needs help. They have three out of a top four, and they don't have a third pair
Right.
to speak of. So they've got some work to do,
And
and
no
they
cap
haven't had
and
and
no cap space.
and no cap space to do it, and no prospects. Right? They've traded away all of their draft picks for the last few years to get as strong as they are. So
Right.
they're going to
Well,
be a tricky team on the back end.
right.
especially, Braden McNabb's another year older.
Right.
But I think they've gotten better, right?
Yes.
They're very strong down the middle now, which used to be their biggest weakness. They've got Hurdle, Eichel, and Carlson.
Yep.
Very strong down the middle. So they're honestly, from a center perspective, I think there aren't a lot of teams that can compete with
Yes.
Florida down the middle. Vegas is one of them.
Right.
LA is one of them. They've got
Right.
three great centers, at least two good ones two great ones and a good one. Um,
I'd actually argue that LA might have gotten worse in they got a
well,
lot
no,
older.
I'm
Yeah.
talking only about the center position.
Yeah.
That's all I'm talking
Yeah.
about is the center position.
But you're right.
Um,
Vegas is going right now, if you look
they're
at the
very strong
West.
down the middle, and they've
Yeah.
improved themselves on the wing.
Right.
Right? You've got scoring wings in Mark Stone,
Right.
Mitch Marner,
Yeah.
Ivan Barbashev. You know, they're getting a great amount of efficiency out of the contract of Dorofeev, or however you
Yeah.
pronounce it. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm you for the Russian name. Um, so they can score they're strong down the window, and they can down the middle, and they can score on you, from the wings 67 different ways. So like they're a strong team up front,
Yeah.
but they're going to I think they're going to let some pucks in the net
Yeah,
this
they're gonna be let
year.
some pucks in the net. So they're questionably right now, but if you look at the West, you look for the team that is right now the favorite coming out of the West. I think you got to point to them. I think Colorado's not too far behind. They're still there.
Yep.
Dallas is still, they've got some tinkering to do. They've lost, they brought in Ratton's going to go a whole season there. They did, they did lose a few pieces at the deadline, but you still got to think that they're still there and got great goaltending. They lost Granlund, so that hurts them down the middle. Again, they're another team now looking for another centerman. You got Robertson, but they're looking to trade him. If you listen to all the experts and stuff, so
Yeah, but
um,
they're still strong down the middle, right?
they
You've
also
got
lost
four guys.
Dadnov, right? Too, right? So
That he's such a streaky guy, Dadnoff. And he plays less than zero defense,
right,
less than zero defense.
yeah, yeah,
But like, first of all, Dallas is going to have to gel under a new coach, right? That's item number one
yeah,
for them.
yeah.
Secondly, you've got to figure out, um, you've got to figure out what you're going to do with Robertson, right? You're strong down the middle. You're set at the middle, right? Middle plus, because you have four centers for your top three lines. And so, well, somebody's going to play the wing. You got Sagan, you got Hintz, Wyatt Johnston, and Matt Duchene,
Yep.
right?
That is
One of
strong
those
down
guys is
there.
going to play the wing, but all fantastic options
Yeah.
for the center.
But and I think that's why they sort of see Robertson maybe as a trade bait, right? Something of value to bring something in to help them in another place, right?
Right. And
So,
the question is, what do you replace that with? More firepower up front?
but
Do you bring
please
in
tell me that Robertson doesn't go to Toronto because then he'll convince him to keep his brother, and
the Robertson brothers?
we don't want the Robertson brothers in Toronto.
Agreed.
Yeah, we don't
Agreed.
want
I
that in
think
Toronto.
I actually, just for the entertainment value of this podcast, I hope the Robertson brothers play together
Please
in
no.
Toronto,
Oh,
and
I
that
might have to
Nick
change teams.
becomes,
I
and
might have to
then
change teams.
Nick becomes a horrible influence on his brother, who stops back checking
Oh, his
and turns.
brother though, he's been streaky too. He's had some great, and he hasn't showed up in the playoffs necessarily either.
He showed up this year. He was the only guy scoring for them in the series against Edmonton.
He had those couple games there. He was like one or two games. The
Yeah,
same with the Mitch Marner thing. Mitch Marner that one year he had everybody goes, oh, he scored a point a game in the playoffs. Yeah, seven of his fucking points came in games where they were way out of it. So
All
whatever.
right, so let's talk about who really blew it this summer. You got to start with Ken Holland.
Oh, LA, like one of the knocks against Edmonton was their age. He goes to LA and takes half the age with him.
I can't believe they signed Cody Cece for $4.5 million for 4 years. They signed Brian Dumoulin for 3 years at $4 million, and then some octogenarian named Corey Bear.
Hold on. Corey Perry, they this is how they see it. They're going to tell you how they see it and how I see it. They signed Corey Perry because he's been in five of the last Stanley Cup finals. So they're probably saying, hey, we're going to get to the Stanley Cup finals because we
He's
got Corey
lost them
Perry. But
all
guess what?
though.
He lost them all. So he's the jinx. So
Yeah, yeah.
they're not winning right now. As far as I'm concerned, you can eliminate the LA Kings from winning anything this season. So,
They do
um,
not have, other than Brent Clark. No, that's not true. Mikey Anderson is also under 30. Doughty's 35. CC is 31, plays like he's 41.
terrible.
Dumoulin is 33, plays like he's 38. Edmondson is 32. Love the guy. I have nothing awful to say about him. Let me just tell you, Brant
They also
Clark
lost
better have,
Tanner Jeannot as well, which,
well, good riddance.
yeah,
By the
but
way,
still,
that was, we're talking about loser stuff. We'll get to that in a minute
the
because
Bruins look pretty bad too. Like the Bruins
that
right now look a
signing made
minor league team at the moment.
that signing made no sense. But like honestly, the Kings' hopes defensively, I think, ride on Brant Clark turning into like you know a massive improvement guy, like a surprise
Yeah,
massive improvement, like a Sam Gerard or something like
yeah,
that. Although he's
yeah,
bigger
yeah,
than that, but
yeah.
oh, they
So,
are they're going to need to take a they're going to need to take a step forward somehow. And don't forget, they've got a lot of guys coming off next year. They can't go too crazy signing anybody this year because they got Kopitar UFA next year. Now he'll
right,
retire as a King. I don't
right.
know. I'm not worried about that. But Kempe, who's making 5.5 this year, is up for a new deal this year.
Yeah,
He's a $10 million guy.
yeah.
So
It's crazy
you
what's
can't
going
go
on there.
crazy. Yeah, they
Yeah.
they put all this money in these aging defensemen that make no sense to me at all.
The other
Then
team. Sorry, go ahead.
then I was no, go ahead and change the subject because I was going to move
I
on
was gonna say
myself.
Boston. Like right now, they look like a minor league team. And if you're David Pastrnak or Charlie McAvoy, you're going, what the hell did I stick around for?
Tanner Janot at $3.5 million for 5 years, given what he brings.
It's just terrible. This team, Bruins don't make the playoffs next year. I don't care what anybody says.
There's no way.
No way.
There's
Going,
no way.
no way. It's just terrible. Just
How do you pay
terrible.
$3.5 million for a fourth line player?
Just nuts.
Yep.
So, um,
But let's go to the worst contract of the year, which may be the worst contract in the last 10 years, was Columbus re-signing Ivan Provorov for $8.5 million a year.
I know it was 8.5 million, but I put Orlov up there at whatever he got, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5. He's got to be up there too in terms of bad contracts.
We can talk about that. I'm going to look that one up right now
He was
because
that's
Orlov signed for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
What, 6.5?
Um, at 6.5.
That's terrible. I don't care 2 years or not. It's still a bad deal. It's overpayment. He had a terrible
Pro,
playoff. He might be the single reason why.
Provorov is signed for 5 years at $8.5 million
It's insane. It's
through
just
his age
insane.
33 season.
It's
That's
insane.
insane.
Yeah. So,
And look, I have a lot of sympathy for Columbus in the sense that perhaps you got to overpay a little bit to get people to stay there.
yeah.
And
Well,
I don't want to
you want
crap on the
you want
city
to
of
talk
Columbus.
about
I've never
feel
been there,
yeah,
but
you want to talk about teams too you feel badly for. How badly do you feel for Buffalo? Nobody wants to play there.
I
Everybody
don't feel
wants to
badly for Buffalo.
leave.
You make your own culture. You dig your own
I
grave.
don't disagree with you, and they've got a clean house in the front office. It's just clear that nobody knows what they're doing there. Start over. Wipe the slate clean and start over.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to
Yeah.
retool. And
Yeah, but
maybe they'll
Adams isn't the guy to do it. It's
no.
clearly he can't keep anybody happy. He can't, you know, JJ Petraka wanted to leave. He demanded to leave, and now they're going to probably trade Byram, one of their best defensemen, because he's saying he'll stay, but behind the scenes he goes, "Get me out of this train wreck."
Well, there's that, and I think he's also what's my role here, right?
Right.
They've got a whole bunch of TP1 type defensemen, and that's what he wants to be
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
dumpster fire going on there.
the dumpster fire as usual, as usual. But let's go to the
Where we
other big story of the offseason, which is that the Edmonton Oilers, who were partially undone yet again in the final by goaltending, have done zero to shore up that position in the offseason. And
how
now,
did they
granted,
not how
it's
did they not
July
go?
7th,
Yes.
right? Anything can happen.
But if you're
Anything can happen.
if
But
you're
so far, oh my God, what a whiff.
the only thing they've done, and if you listen to the experts, they fired their goaltender coach, have bringing somebody new, and they're saying that they're going to give that coach a chance to coach Skinner and Pickard, and hope that that helps them. If they don't, they'll worry about the goaltending situation during the season. That might be the stupidest thing I've ever heard. If you haven't seen enough body of work from these two in the last two playoffs, I don't know what you're thinking. I like, and the other big story of the playoffs for them is they actually tried to unload Nurse, and he refused to waive his no trade clause.
Well, he thought he was going to win a Stanley Cup this year, and he
No,
came within a
no.
couple
It's
games.
since the final, since
Oh,
when
since the finals.
free agencies opened up, they went to him and asked him to waive his no trade, and he said no. I want to
Yeah.
stay. But again, I said this to you um, just after the season, and when they started doing what they were doing and losing players and signing some of these bit
Mm-hmm.
parts, and they did get Magpine, or how do you pronounce his name?
Manjapani.
Manjapati
Did you
from
say magpie?
Washington. I think of that pie when I think about him. But anyways, they brought him in, which the Leafs kind of wanted to, because he would have been a good depth forward for them. But I said to you that they've got the same problem that the Leafs had for so many years. The Leafs were paying 4 or 5 guys too much money, and they kept changing the bit parts around them because they couldn't afford to every year and hoping something would stick, right? And
Yeah.
it's never worked. The Oilers are doing the exact same thing right now. They got two of the greatest players on earth running this team and getting them to dragging them through the playoffs, and they keep changing the bit parts around them, hoping something will stick. It's just not going to work, especially when you got nothing in net and you're bad on the back end. So, they need to do something drastically different here in order to find their way back to the final next year, because there's only so far that McDavid and Drysdale can drag this team, and hopefully Hyman gets healthy. But it's looking like that wrist injury. We all thought it was a wrist. It was
Yeah.
a wrist, dislocated, torn ligaments in his wrist, really bad. He's talking about hopeful I'm ready for the beginning of the season. And if they get off to another bad start, do you think they could pull it back together like they did the last couple of seasons and drag themselves into the playoffs and then to the Stanley Cup final? I just don't see it right now.
Well, I the I'm putting the goaltending thing aside for a second, which is hard to do. But putting the goaltending thing aside for a second, here are the positives.
It's
Okay.
really hard when you got to score 6, 7 goals a night.
Um, Darnell Nurse didn't waive his no trade clause, which actually cuts both ways, right? It means he wants to stay in Edmonton.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I get that.
And that is when if you're trying to build a winning culture, having big time players like that want to stay
Yeah.
helps with that. So there's a positive story there. Number
His nine and a
two,
half million dollar salary can go a long way to solving some of their issues.
yeah. Number two, I think they've brought in some other interesting pieces. Not certainly not
Not Stanley
um
Cup winning pieces, but
yeah, but certainly not like needle moving pieces, but interesting pieces. Like first of all, they re-signed Trent Frederick. Obviously not a great signing on paper, but if he can find some of the grit and a little of the scoring touch he had in Boston, maybe, after another year developing with the team, he can really bring something next season. Number two, you bring in a guy like Curtis Lazar, who, from all reports, is like a great locker room guy. He's not going to bring
yeah,
you 20 goals anymore, but
yeah.
he could be a good, strong fourth line contributor,
Well,
not a fighter or
he's going to
anything.
replace Brown.
Yeah, he's going to replace Brown. And then, unfortunately, he's a tiny little guy, but you've got Matty Savoy coming in, who is, part of the trade. Lot, yeah, I think he's an Alberta kid. I think
Right.
he played junior in Alberta. A lot of offensive talent.
Yeah, and
Maybe like
Mangiapane's going to replace some of the scoring for them that they weren't getting
and
out of Arvidsson,
exactly.
out of Skinner. So yeah, they've definitely tried to manage the wins and the losses, but their gaping holes are still there.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, they are. Look, their entire top six is coming back.
Yeah.
I think maybe the third pairing could use a little bit of a rethink. I mean, I like Jake Wallman, uh, but he kind of disappeared a bit. at the end. Obviously, Troy Stetcher is useless. Ty Emberson,
Yeah, this is why I
didn't
think
do
there's going to be
wasn't.
some activity this summer. There's so many teams looking for big pieces, whether that's a center, a defenseman, a goaltender. I still don't know why Edmonton didn't go after Gibson and let him go to
You
Detroit
know,
for basically a bag of pucks.
it's beyond
Um,
that, but it also proves that you cannot bury a third pairing in once you get into the conference finals and the
yeah,
finals. You have
yeah,
to have three pairs
yeah.
that can get you through, and Edmonton did not in the
Yeah,
end.
but this is again, we go back to Florida. They had four solid lines. They could roll those four lines out. They were good in both ends of the ice, no matter what. And then they had great goaltending, and they had a stalwart defensive core. Like they had
Yeah,
big hitting defensive core. So,
yeah.
you
And
know,
by the way, they just got maybe even a little bit better with the cheap signing of Jeff Petrie, who's a 1 year deal. It's not gonna cost you again this year.
I hate that guy.
He's not gonna hurt you. He's
No,
not gonna hurt you.
no,
As a third pairing defenseman, that's a pretty good option.
yeah, yeah, no question.
Um,
Oh well.
but yeah, they okay. So
How much time
last
are we
before
gone here?
we're way over. We are way over, but we're
There we
having
go.
fun.
There we
We're
go. Who
having
cares
fun.
later? Hopefully everybody's still
Yeah.
listening.
Um, so let's talk about three things to look for that might get trading going. The three that I have are what's going to happen with Bowen Byram. We just talked about that a
Yeah.
little bit. What are the Leafs going to do at 3C? And then in terms of what might get the league going in
Forget
different
3C. I think they're looking for a 2C
for
and
a
making
2C,
Tavares will be 3C.
3C. Um, and then, what teams are going to need to spend a little bit to make some moves to get to the floor.
Yeah.
Anaheim being at the top of that list, and what that could do in terms of unlocking salary money with bad
Yeah.
contracts on certain teams who can then turn around and make other moves for other
Yeah. Yeah.
assets. And I think that's what's left to come this summer. Looking forward to anything you're looking at.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all you said there. And I still think that there's going to be a couple big trades before training camp. As I said, I don't think the teams that we see in Edmonton, Toronto, and possibly Winnipeg are the teams that you're going to see start in October that'll be on the ice. Because I just think that they all realize they need significant pieces in order to be competitive going into next year. And I think they're going to push um, some kind of movement. And teams like Calgary and other teams that have some pieces that would be attractive are going to be holding all the cards there, and they're holding out for an overprice, right?
Yeah,
They're waiting for someone to overpay them. And the
yeah,
problem is none of those teams that we're talking about have a lot of draft capital. At least I think next year have a fourth line and a fourth rounder and a seventh liner. Edmonton can't have any picks left because they've dealt away so many things. Winnipeg probably doesn't have any either. So it's going to be interesting to see some big names move around the league somewhere.
yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for. I think to your point, we I don't know if we said this online or before we got on, it's all going to come down to that Thanksgiving Day point. If you're not looking like you're going to be a Stanley Cup playoff team, some big moves got to happen before we get to the end of of November.
Yep.
So I
I
look
I
for
agree.
either a couple moves now and then a lot to happen in the first quarter of the season next year because I think that's everybody realizes the importance of a good start and get out of the gates and be strong and gel going into the back half of the season.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up our last
37
episode of the season.
episodes this
37
season. Who would
episodes.
have thought that we would have done
Congratulations.
37 episodes? We've done more episodes than we have average viewers.
Yep. Well, almost double. Um, but for those viewers, a message to our viewers, thank you for
Yes,
sticking with us through this first
yeah,
season. We
much
are happy to
appreciated.
say that barring disaster, we are both planning to do this again starting sometime during training camp. In
Yes.
order to understand and know when we might be picking it back up at the beginning of training camp, we invite you to follow our Instagram account at aiming_5_hole. We haven't done anything on it in a while,
No,
not since episode 7. So 30 episodes ago was our
we're
last
going to
post.
change that next
We
year.
we are going to change that next year, and we will starting, sometime in the middle late to late August, we'll post a couple of things that are of interest to us, maybe even before that, and announce when our first episode of the new season will be recorded.
Yes, and if you love our voices, next year we're going to be better because we're going to get better mics, we're going to get better sound, and you actually might get to see, for those who are out there wondering what we look like, if you're not a family friend or a friend period that knows what we look like, you might actually get to see us because we're considering doing the video version on YouTube next year on our Aiming Five Hole YouTube channel. So we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. I might if I get any worse looking over the next
Oh, please. You
couple
got
of
the
months.
best
We don't
hair.
know.
You got the best hair in Hollywood. I'd put your hair up against Brad Pitt's hair any day of the week. And I just saw
Wow.
F1.
Wow. Well, that's going to give our listeners something to look forward to.
There we
What is the
go.
mystery of Ryan's hair uh, before August, the end of August?
There we go. Well, this
Anyway,
has been a lot of fun. Thanks for doing this. I know we did this on a bit of a whim this year.
yeah.
I echo what you said. Thank you for the people who have stuck with us all season and listened to all 37 episodes. My mother-in-law being one of them, your family being the other ones, my friends up in Toronto that have listened and appreciate it, and
And that one guy in India who
one
has
guy in
listened to
India.
us
Yeah,
fairly
reach
fairly
out to us.
reliably.
Reach out to us on one of our handles and let us know who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And who your favorite team is.
Yeah, great. Well, look, it's been a lot of fun. Enjoyed doing this and moving our weekly text chains and conversations into this. We didn't know what to expect when we started this year. It was a lot of fun, and again, we're doing it our way. We're not experts. We're not true hockey guys. We're just hockey lovers,
We
and
are. We are. And by the
we're gonna
way,
keep doing this.
we meant to talk about the crappy TV production that
We'll
was
get
the
into that
NHL
this
draft.
year.
We apologize for like the one
Oh,
area that we probably are experts in, we blow off every single time. Next season we're gonna redouble our efforts to get
yes.
into that a little bit more
Is there
often.
any
But
chance
anyway,
PK Subban won't be on ESPN next year?
zero.
Oh,
Count
good.
on it. All right.
Okay, we'll end
Phil,
on that note. Great to see you. I know we'll
great to see
continue
you.
our conversations over the summer, and we'll see the rest of you when we aim for the five hole in October. Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Take
See you
care.
later.
Bye,
Bye
man.
bye.